What if the Stalker franchise and Escape from Tarkov made a VR baby that ended up being actually good? Well, that's pretty much what Convergence is in a nutshell. This gritty single-player game has all of the best elements of Stalker and Tarkov mixed in with that VR experience, which brings the horror and immersion to a whole new level. Also, it's being developed by a single person, which is wild. Alright, so this game has a bit of a weird backstory. Almost a year ago, Paradox of Hope, a VR single-player story-driven game, was issued a cease and desist by 4A Games. 4A are the owners of the Metro franchise. And while it's always frustrating to see a good indie game getting shut down, it's also hard to argue that the dev wasn't basically taking all their inspiration from the Metro franchise. If I didn't tell you that this footage here was actually from a Metro trailer, would you have even known that I just switched games in this edit? So yeah, the cease and desist happened and the developer shut down the project. However, they pivoted to a new project and released it in early access less than a year after Paradox of Hope was delisted from Steam. Obviously reusing much of the groundwork they developed, but just making an experience that was a little bit less of a copycat. This new project is Convergence, same developer, similar gameplay and assets, but a different premise. It's still a single player game, but instead of being a linear story driven experience, it's an extraction shooter with procedurally generated maps, a dog companion, interesting guns, tense gameplay, and a sizable helping of that good old indie jank. In fact, it's so janky that I am a bit conflicted about recommending the title, but I also can't stop playing it either because there is that fun magic under the surface if you're willing to look past some of the rough exterior. Now, the premise is pretty simple and a bit familiar. You're a scavenger venturing into an exclusion zone following some sort of major incident that's unleashed terrifying creatures and supernatural phenomena, aka Stalker. You uncover bits and pieces of the story via notes that you'll find scattered on the maps. And reading these notes with a flashlight while I was fully immersed in the horror that they describe really brings the nightmare alive in a way that non-VR games kind of struggle with. Now currently there's 2 maps with day and night variants of them that significantly alter the game's difficulty. You begin each raid in a van, and once the level is loaded, you turn the key to start the raid. But in the meantime, you can steer the van, honk the horn, plus toggle the radio, lights, windshield wipers, and in the future the dev plans to add even more features to the van that will actually affect the gameplay. But for now, it's mostly just an interactive loading screen. It's kind of a neat touch having such an interactive experience for just a loading menu, and it's something that I think other VR games could absolutely learn from. Now, the starter map is a self-storage area that's pretty basic. Every raid has a different layout thanks to the levels being procedurally generated, and the goal is to loot as much stuff as you can and also complete some of the tasks like killing a certain number of bandits. You extract from the map via a randomized exit point marked with a glow stick. The second map is an underground facility that is nearly pitch black, full of bandits. And if you go out at night, it is full of horrifying monsters. There's also a night variant of these self-storage maps that is absolutely brutal. Now, to help you with these incredible raids, you have some pretty good tools such as a dog companion and some pretty beefy loadout options. You get a slot for a primary weapon like an AK-47 or an SMG, a handgun, you get a bunch of ammo, and whatever else you can cram in your backpack. And by whatever else, I mean healing items, grenades, throwing knives, and more. It's not exactly the most robust arsenal I've ever seen, but there's still a lot to play with. Completing the tasks in the game increases your reputation and unlocks new gear to purchase from vendors at your home base. And unlike a lot of games that sort of give you a dog that doesn't serve much purpose, the dog in Convergence actually does a lot of useful things. For starters, you can pet them, which, petting a dog in VR obviously makes this one of the best games ever made. But your dog can also attack enemies on command. It can dig up loot and growl to alert you of nearby bandits. It's super useful in a fight in that it can distract your enemies and even just outright kill them while you're reloading your weapons. And frankly, I kind of shudder to think about how isolating this experience might be if you didn't have a dog. And I hope more gameplay can be built around having them, like going through holes to unlock doors or something like that. Now, probably my favorite thing about Convergence is how physical everything is. All the weapon mechanics are mechanical, so reloading, repacking your mags, racking the gun, switching attachments, and even cleaning your gun is done via proper interaction. And while a lot of VR games do some of this kind of stuff, Convergence really leans into it quite hard. You heal by stabbing yourself in the chest with a syringe, you recover health by eating food, and you restore stamina by drinking water, physically. And this does create a super immersive experience where you feel like everything you need to do, even from the mundane things like keeping yourself hydrated, is an action that you have to physically perform, and it just keeps you sort of in touch with your character. And truly, your body and your physical skills are the limiting factor in the game. That means how fast can you reload, how fast can you physically switch weapons, heal, etc. It's determined by your coordination and your stamina. If you miss a headshot, that's one more round that you're going to have to manually repack into a mag after the fight is over, so you really don't want to. You're considering these things so much more. Sometimes I felt like John Wick, one-shot headshotting bandits with ease and switching mags like Val Kilmer in Heat. Other times I'd panic and fumble everything, which forced me to desperately stab a bandit to death in CQB. There's just a tension you get in VR because of these controls that you never get in a traditional game. When your own body becomes the obstacle to success, the game takes on a whole new level of difficulty, immersion, and frankly, fun. And out of all the VR games that I've played, Convergence does this stuff best, second maybe to like only Boneworks. And you get all of this fun and immersion even on the basic daytime starter map. Things get absolutely insane though on the night maps, because not only do you have to manage everything physical as you did before, but you also now need to use a flashlight just to see stuff, and that flashlight will alert the enemies. Convergence goes from a Stalker-esque VR extraction shooter to an outright horror game the second the lights go off. The monsters are basically zombie or ghoul-like humanoids. They can be stunned with your flashlight's UV burst, but they also take a ton of damage to kill, and they can tank a few of your melee attacks as well. So once they group up, it's kind of over for you. Now, as much as I am absolutely loving Convergence, it also has a ton of immersion-breaking issues and mechanics. And again, a reminder, this is an early access game, but nonetheless, these issues need to be highlighted. For starters, there's this whole enemies just walk through walls like ghosts type thing going on. Yeah, this tends to happen pretty much all the time, and on the bunker map, enemies can also apparently shoot through walls. This is one of those must-fix issues that the developer really needs to solve ASAP, like before anything else. Because this is a pretty hardcore extraction shooter, it means that the punishment for dying is extremely high. If you die without insurance, then you've just lost thousands of dollars in essential gear. So dying to bandits who can walk through walls undermines pretty much the whole experience. The AI is also pretty rudimentary, with most enemies just walking towards you when alerted instead of taking cover or flanking. Having the enemies being more indirect or more prone to keep their distance would give you a little more time to do inventory management during a gunfight, and not just cheese the fights by pulling out your AK when things go south. The general weapon balance and shooting mechanics both seem a bit off as well. The pistols in this game feel incredibly lethal. One or two well-placed shots will kill even an armored bandit, but the SMG and AK-47 kind of feel like pea shooters by comparison. It also seemed like my weapon sights were misaligned from one play session to the next. Shots that looked perfectly lined up for a headshot would just whiz by an enemy's head for no apparent reason, but the next time I'd log in to play, my sights would be dead on. This just left me with a feeling of extreme inconsistency, or like I didn't understand some of the underlying game mechanics. The spike in difficulty from the starting map to all the other maps is kind of extreme, going from a relatively open and well-lit level to a maze-like bunker in the dark was a massive leap. But then when you run the night variant of the bunker and run into a horde of monsters that just beat you to death in seconds, it feels like there's not really much of a difficulty progression at all. You go from Call Call of Duty levels of difficulty to Dark Souls without any transitionary period. I think there's a lot the dev could do to ease this transition, maybe adding night vision goggles, a lit version of the bunker that eases you into its claustrophobic design a little bit better. There's plenty of things that could be done here. Then of course there's the problem of procedural generation. It always seems like a great idea to have procedural generation in that it should lessen the workload of the developer to make tons of randomly generated levels that feel unique. However, if you don't do procedural generation correctly, you get a lot of repetitive feeling and frankly janky looking levels. And these levels do look pretty janky with lots of the models intersecting each other. And instead of each raid feeling like a fresh, unique location, you're just constantly getting deja vu of similar tile sets that kind of just pulls you out of the experience. And I'm sure this procedural generation is what's leading to a lot of the AI pathing issues as well. Plus it's compounded with progression issues like needing to collect 3 light bulbs, but you play a raid and it has no light bulbs to loot at all. It's hard to know what would help this solo dev optimize their time a bit better, but I think more handcrafted levels might actually be less work and a better experience in the long run. The extraction shooter mechanics are extremely well done, but the foundation needs to be shored up before I feel it can be a fully rewarding and well-realized experience. Now, all that said, overall, I think this game is worth picking up if you're into VR gaming and you don't mind some of the basic bugs. Convergence right now feels like an early access game in pretty much every sense of the word. It's janky, unbalanced, and missing content. But when you have those moments in between the jank, you can really see how this developer is onto something truly special. Each update seems like it's pushed the game forward in significant ways. The first major update dropped in early June, adding night variants to the maps, and the last major update just released a few weeks ago, adding new upgrade items, cosmetic unlocks, tutorial improvements, a vendor return system, bug fixes, and more. Plus, the developer's track record with their previous projects updates was pretty solid as well. Paradox of Hope was one of the better VR games that I've ever played, and it wasn't even finished before it got cancelled. If that's anything to go by, Convergence is an easy recommendation once it's out of early access. There's tons of new content planned for the future updates like bosses, a hideout, a vehicle leveling system, and more. So I'll be sure to keep tabs on it as it gets closer to that 1.0 update. What do you guys think about projects like this? I feel like VR is still a fairly unexplored realm in terms of game modes and cool concepts that can take this platform and play to its strengths. Do you guys have VR? Are you playing it regularly? If so, what are some of your go-to titles? Let me know in the comments. And if you don't have a VR headset, check out this video on Body Cam, a game attempting to take a much more immersive approach to the shooter formula, even if it is a bit ripped off from another game. As always, guys, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. This is Level Cap signing off.